Hey, we're doing this one because we were specifically requested to do this one, right?
Yeah, so a big special mention to Ashok. Thank you, mate. You requested for Doug to give his opinion on this movie, and I'm really glad you did personally, because I was pretty hopeful he would watch this movie.
Me too. Thank you so much. I mean that legitimately from the bottom of my heart. All of my thoughts here are going to be for anyone who's willing to listen, but this is mostly for you, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you gave me the inspiration to watch this movie, because it came right about the time that we did Joji,
Yes.
right? And I remember even in our Joji review talking about how those two were kind of like dark twins of one another, or like two halves of the wrong side of the same coin. You know what I mean? Yeah. If I could use that vernacular, but I legitimately was smiling ear to ear pretty much throughout the entire movie, which is strange given the actual premise of the movie, except for the fact that it just like everything free flowed with a kind of jazz in it. Yes. And you root for the villain. Absolutely. But I loved doing that. It was great. What did you and Sunny think when you guys watched it first? Were you like weirded out by some of the darkness? Like, does dark comedy factor into something you like to watch?
Yeah, no, I think for both of us, dark comedy was definitely enjoyed, but I think this specific dark comedy was it was like very much like comedy where you didn't really see the darkness too much at the start, and then suddenly it became like, where is this going and where is this taking me? This is going somewhere which I didn't expect. Where's that sort of jovial sort of comedy that there was at the start? Like there was something obviously dark and almost something that's wrong with this character, at the start, but you sort of laughed it off until it got to the stage where like, we're seeing what's happening here. It's going to go downhill pretty fast. But yeah, no, it was pretty interesting to see that side. Before we get on to sort of the storyline though, man, what do you think of the comedy? Because this is the first time you're probably seeing a Malayalam comedy, right? Like at least the first half was very like we've seen Drishyam so far, and we've seen Joji, which are definitely not sort of comedies, unless you want to talk about Mohanlal's sort of first half appearance in Drishyam 1, which had a few comedic moments. But
yeah, he's got some good beats.
No, definitely he does. But what do you think about the comedy aspect of this? Like the whole, the talking to yourself narration stuff that happened, or even some of the humor.
I loved it. I was into it. The whole, like, it didn't necessarily ever break the fourth wall, but it set. Dark comedy has always had a very special place for me, in that I like had to crack the code on it when I was younger and first getting into cinema. And the one that really did it for me was Death to Smoochie with Robin Williams and Edward Norton. Yeah. And that's about like the seedy underbelly of children's entertainment in essentially like a Barney type character. If you haven't watched it, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. And it's all about like how concessions are supposed to be handled at ice shows for these things. It's hysterical, but it's a little bit wild, and it's very dark, and like there's murder in this movie about a kid's show. And this felt very much like that. And I remember after having watched it, and I was talking to you about it before one of our reviews, I was like, man, it kind of felt like Nightcrawler. And you told me that this movie was based on Nightcrawler. So here's what I enjoyed most about it. Nightcrawler, not funny.
Not at all.
Never once is that movie funny, right? Like, Jake Gyllenhaal is a sociopathic, insane person in that movie, and he plays that to a T, and it's wonderful. But the narration, the internal dialogue, the way that everything is presented, almost like this goofy kind of klutz he's like a Mr. Magoo, backing his way into the success that he tees up for himself at the beginning of the movie, was fantastic. It was pitch perfect. It was like a bow on the top. So right when the movie gave you, let's say, a cobra in a car that kills somebody, you're getting these like wonderful light musical beats, and you start to see like a little smile. And what I wanted to say when we were talking right before the show, I think this movie started with the last line, which was "Welcome to Mukundan Unni Associates," when he shakes the hand of the doctor, who was the only one who really bucked against him the entire time when he's running his shrift in the hospital. That's what the entire movie was written down as, right? And we have to help him earn that, and we have to make sure that that matters, because he gets every single thing he wants. From the time that you see him when he starts the movie, he's talking about how he's 35, but he's been 29 for years, and how he's trying to find something, and we eventually see him find things. To all of his calculations and all of the horrible, malicious things that he does are conducted with such like a live, almost goofiness and almost aloofness, that it's hilarious. The only moment for me that actually felt dark in a movie where he kills someone with a cobra was the moment where he actually gets to the one accident scene and uses the bloody thumbprint to make sure he gets the what was it called again?
Some document, right?
Either way, the paperwork,
yeah,
right?
correct.
Like the paperwork that says this is going to be the guy that's where it felt a little bit dark. But then it course corrects almost immediately and gets you back to hilarity. Like it almost played like an Indian Farrelly Brothers movie where you're rooting for the villain, and I loved that dichotomy. The way that it smushed together such horrible atrocities and two characters that eventually do it together because he gets married to somebody who understands what he's doing and she decides to be with him because she knows what he's doing. It's incredible, right? It just had me chuckling constantly. There were multiple times where I looked at the screen, literally just said, I love this movie. Yeah. And there's something about the deadpan way that the main character is played that underscores the comedy so perfectly that it's charming, charismatic, enigmatic, right? Like Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool does very much the same thing that this character does, except this character has a straight face, never overreacts, and does everything in his mind.
Yeah.
And Ryan Reynolds would be like, well, I got a bullet hole in my arm. Oh, that's going to suck. Like funny. It's still funny. And I love it. And Ryan, if you're watching, I doubt it. I don't mean to malign you. But this movie, especially, is being inspired by a film that is very dark and very deftly shows you what it's like when someone has access to the vision that they have seen for their entire life and they know what it's going to cost them and they don't care about it. To see that through a comedic lens in a totally different culture, it felt like a hallelujah moment almost, like standing atop the mountain of something and being like, whoever wrote this understands dark comedy. They understood that there was a different side of the Nightcrawler story that could very well be expressed through that cultural lens. And I'm cheering for a guy to destroy generators at a hospital when children are dying.
Yeah.
Like internally, right? Like I'm not actually getting up on my couch, but you want him to do what he's going to do. And he looks cool as hell when he's standing out there in the rain and he's hacking and slashing at all that stuff with an axe. And like, he has the police bent to his will. He has the doctors bent to his will. He owns the hospital by the end of the movie. And you want him to. That's a magic trick. And that all comes down to really good writing and spectacular acting on behalf of everyone. Because you have a main character who has to portray, I'm getting what I want now, and I'm going to get what I want. You have to have the guy that he learned it from be seedy and try to take it back from him, and then eventually be killed as a result of it. You have to have the shitty Nepo doctor who is like, you can't do this in my hospital, who eventually gets taken down and put in his place. The scene where he walks up to who will be his future wife, and he's like, you want to go out? That was one of my favorites. It let you know immediately what he was going to get. And at the end of the movie, he gets it. And he gets it in such a manner to that doctor that it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Definitely.
Horrible everything that he does, but wonderful. And I was taken with it. I was so charmed by it. It felt like a popcorn movie, but the person that you're cheering for is awful.
Yes. No, it was pretty I think that whole that position you're in watching this movie, it gets really weird at times. Because I was saying, like, you start off with like, okay, cool, I can get behind this guy. Until it gets deeper and deeper. It's kind of like a situation where you don't know how bad this is going to get while you're sort of watching it at the start. And in a way, you don't want it to go down that path, but it's inevitable. And credit to the writers and everyone for just committing to that cause, because I think that was one of the controversial things about this movie, that it doesn't hold back with sort of how dark it sort of gets, and it leaves you in some ways uncomfortable with some of the truths that it sort of tells you about the world and stuff like that. You mentioned I did not even think of Mr. I think Mr. Magoo and Nightcrawler. That's the first time I've heard those two crossover, and probably the last time I will. I think the other two that I had when I was sort of watching it were obviously, like, the whole narration thing reminded me a lot of Christian Bale in American Psycho. Like, that's what it reminded me of, like, just the whole talking to yourself, because he does that, and that's also another Psycho. So I think I call this guy Kerala Psycho or Malayalam Psycho, something like that in the review we did. And obviously the other one was Better Call Saul, just because of the whole lawyer and the seediness behind that and the things that he sort of does sometimes. Obviously, this is a bit darker, and he resorts to killing people, which comes up. But yeah, man, I thought he was pretty good. What did you think about I know you mentioned about the performances. There were some pretty big names in this. So the main character, Vineeth Sreenivasan, I think he is sort of a big sort of star, but he's also sort of a writer, a singer, so sort of some other things. There were two other characters I want to talk to you about, because you mentioned one about the wife in the end, Meenakshi, who I thought was fantastic. Actually, I would have actually liked to see.
She was amazing.
I would actually like to see more of her, like actually sort of more of her story, and sort of seen maybe a spin-off series or something like that to explain sort of her motivations as to why she sort of wants to be behind this guy. But
just the way that she's so immediately is like, well, yeah, it makes financial sense.
Yes.
Like I'm here to find somebody like this, and I found him, so this is what we're gonna do. And the one scene that I haven't yet talked about, where they're getting on the bus, and Mukundan actually feels like he's actually being taken down, and he goes and gets the orange soda and actually has a little bit of it out there and goes to give it to the driver, and then it's only like it's chance and luck that actually saves his life, and then ultimately gets him everything he was desiring in the very first place. Like, that was where I understood this was a masterwork of comedic, like truly dark, yes, but comedic timing.
Definitely.
Like, you have to set the scene with, he's going to kill this woman. He's going to kill himself. He's going to kill this driver. He's going to kill every single person on this bus just so he doesn't lose. Because he says constantly, even to the ghost of the man who inspired him to do what he does, I would rather die than, see myself slip into obscurity. I'm butchering the line, but something along that, right?
No, I think it's...
I'd rather die.
Yeah.
And he gets the chance to do it. And he sets it up. And it's only as a result of a freak chance. And then he immediately pivots from multiple person murder, immediately pivots to, oh, now I'm going to get all this stuff. And then he takes it another step further, damages the generators, and a step further beyond that, and tries to go to the morgue to try to get the dead child's stuff. And again, all of it is compounded.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's our break point. But you see him give to the policeman who's after him, who tells him he's going to take him down. And you can't help but be like, he got it.
He got you.
He got it, because our music is telling us that this is our hero. Everything is set so that he's our hero. And the way the main character plays it with such stoicism on his face. And like I said, everyone else's performance serves that. So either someone is on his side unwaveringly, or begins to question him. Like, the only character who begins to question him, and wow, I even forgot to talk about him, was, the other kind of down on his luck lawyer that is his friend that goes to work with him and, kind of becomes his cohort. And the way that he takes care of him is also horrific. Oh, the way that he brings him out of the picture, it's just, you care enough about any person who shows up in the frame that they're either for or against him. But the movie definitely takes you to the point where you realize, I want Mukundan to get what he's supposed to have. And you're horrified and elated in equal measure every time he does something really, truly terrible to get what he wants.
Yeah, no, it's really... I mean, that part when he sort of, ends... I think Robin's his name in the movie. Sudhi Koppa, I think that's the actor that plays him. But yeah, that relationship and that dynamic was really interesting, because you got to see how he demonstrated how paranoid, how quickly paranoid, Mukundan really gets. Because as soon as he sees him dress up, he's like, "This is a threat. I've got to get rid of him." And the thing that struck me was because at the point when he kills him, which is towards the end, he does it so matter of fact and so no emotion, no big scene, just that, you're over. Whereas the rest, it seems like they work towards, especially with the other advocate Venu, who I want to talk to you a little bit about, and the contrast between these two and all the other supporting characters. Because I think I wanted to get your opinion on, so this guy, Suraj Venjaramoodu, he's actually a pretty big star. So he's a bigger star than Vineeth Sreenivasan is in this movie. But what did you think about his sort of performance, and also just the whole, what he sort of represented? Was he the consciousness, or was he like, speaking to him as a ghost, or was he edging him on to do more? I really found that pretty interesting to keep his character involved somehow, because I just found that continuation pretty good. Like, did he feel bad? Like, did he? It doesn't seem like he feels bad, but maybe there is something inside him that does. It's why he sort of still exists.
That actually, that brings up one of my favorite comedic moments, is when he's talking to the ghost of the other advocate, and he's in the store and he's looking at the good erasers and he's like, erasers, I love that smell. And like, like those were the moments where it so throws you into a completely other headspace that you can't help again just be charmed. But to peel it back, I thought his performance was wonderful because he has to have the swagger. Yeah. He has to have the unbelievable, undeniable confidence. He has to be a lovely person. And he also kind of has to be a dirtbag, because he has to be the entire mold for whom Mukundan eventually becomes. And then he eventually leaps over that, right? So he was absolutely wonderful in that regard, because he was like Daniel Craig, man. Like, I'm looking good. I'm feeling good. I've got my system worked and I've got it worked out now. And nobody can ever do this better than me. And unfortunately, he talked to the one guy who could. So, he gets his licks in, and then eventually we get that scene with the security in the hospital battle, right? Where he's like, okay, all right, now I know how to get back one over on you. So I think it was set up so that they were equal chess. They were equal pieces on a chessboard, right? One wasn't necessarily better than the other, but one provided the mold. And that's what Mukundan eventually slips into. And he's working constantly to try to one-up him. When he has no other antagonist directly in his field, because eventually the police get involved, right? We see that. And his ex-girlfriend, which is another whole thing which I had totally forgotten about until just now, because the end of the movie is so deliciously brutal.
Oh my God.
When you see that she's pregnant and the ex-girlfriend comes in and she has nothing and he has everything. And she was the one character telling him, like, don't do this. Like, brutal.
Yeah.
And he only invited her to rub it in her face. But the reason that we see the ghost is because he needs to have a tete-a-tete with somebody. And it can't be the person who he's already described constantly as his lesser, who he ultimately kills because he starts to level himself up. So he wiped from the playing field the only actual opponent that he had, and then when somebody came in with a chess move he didn't anticipate, he also wiped him off. But somebody who had an analytical mind like his to almost match it, that can be a powerful motivator. That can be the person to push you and keep going and keep doing what you're doing, because he had already achieved what the other advocate had. But how do you keep getting more? How do you keep getting more? How do you keep getting more? So he needed him there to constantly remind him and question him. That's just my theory, but I think that's why we see him. And it also provides some great humor. Like it's another way to kind of just like take you immediately out of the moment. Because again, you look at all of the set pieces just on a board, and it's one of the most tragic stories of all time, right? Like Joji was a super tragic story, but all of our cues tell us that we're supposed to be having a little bit of fun here. And the real hard truth of the matter is that he's only getting what he's getting because he's exploiting a fractured system anyway.
Correct.
Right? So it's a comedy that is designed to educate you, the viewer. Hey, make sure you understand that this stuff is happening. Because even though you rooted for this guy, when you find yourself in a hospital, somebody is actually going to try to do this to you.
Yeah.
Or might try to do it to you. So it was essentially just a cautionary tale told with these explosive terms that uses humor as a way to keep the story stuck in your mind, so that when you do end up actually in a tragedy, you don't just dig yourself into a hole. You're like, I saw this story once upon a time, and maybe I should question whether or not the people showing up in my hospital room are here to help me or possibly take advantage of me.
Yeah.
And the other people that are involved. That's where I really think this movie kind of threaded a wonderful needle. Because if you can deliver that story and make people walk away feeling like, all right, that's wild, but I had a good time, then it sticks in their brain.
Yep.
I think the juxtaposition of that dark and the humor means that it will stay as a story with you for as long as you have cognitive ability. And those two characters treating it the way that they did, subtly different between the two, is, I think, what really underpins, like, there's always going to be somebody doing this.
Yeah.
There's always going to be somebody doing this. If it's not this one, it's going to be this one, and they can have different faces and they can have different approaches. Watch out.
Now, the commentary.
Especially for Cobras in your car.
No, the commentary about that's really interesting. I think, yeah, as a point that I think Sunny and I also talked about when we sort of reviewed it, and we said something like, the humor in this movie really makes it, you know, watchable and entertaining, and also really sticks in your head. Because I think, you know, if it's devoid of that, this movie would be super, super depressing, and it'd be harder to watch again for any reason, or like, see,
it'd be Nightcrawler.
It'd be Nightcrawler. Like, I can't specifically remember too many scenes from that movie, but I can tell you, I mean, I saw that movie a long time ago as well. But from this movie, I can specifically point out scenes which I'm like, whoa, that happened. Like, you know, you pointing out the eraser scene was one that I had sort of forgotten, but the small things, like he had like I think so he sets up and he obviously, you know, gets Advocate Venu murdered, and at the wedding there's like a WhatsApp group, and he messages something like you know, like he was a great man or something like that.
Oh my god, the scenes, yes, all the like little animated scenes. So oh my god, because it all happened so fast. But like, yeah, when he's talking about how he killed his grandfather accidentally.
There's so many scenes like that, which is just hilarious, but it's like, it just breaks that tension point where it's like, all right, let me just insert some comedy right here. It's still in tone with the movie, you know, and makes sense in the world of where they're living in, but it just does, they get that balance so right at the right time, you know, right place, comedy when it's needed, move on to the darker stuff, and it gets less and less as we go on, which is the point of the movie, because at that point you're already hooked. You're like, I have to see what's going to happen here. I'm not going to stop watching.
I have to know
what's the end of this. Are they actually going to go down the path? Like, you kind of want him to fail it sometimes, but no, that's not what the commentary you said. People do get away with this. People do it. The other point I really liked was, like, you did mention about that Advocate Venu. I like the three advocates basically between Sreenivasan, Mukundan, Venu, and the other junior one, Robin. Essentially, like, I like how those three just play out, because it's like, Robin could have been doing what, you know, Advocate Venu, what's it called? Mukundan is there. So he sees that before, you know, that happens. The difference between, you know, Sreenivasan and, Venu is basically just that. Like, Mukundan Unni is just a whole different breed that he's going to take everyone out. Whereas no one is at that level as he is, because he's just psychotic. You know, to him, murder has become like.
Well, yeah, not only that, like, Venu is here.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
He's doing what he wants to do. That's it. And Mukundan tells us in the very first scene of the movie that he wants to achieve everything. Right? Like, he wants to have a very special life. And you don't believe about midway through the movie that he believes it, or that he deserves it, that he's going to get it, or that he should have it. And that's kind of the crux point where, like, the rest of the humor from then on, and the music that we hear, and all the cues, and all the, like, weird little coincidences go to serve, like, no, some people just actually get extraordinarily wealthy based on doing incredibly shitty stuff. It's Wolf of Wall Street. It's the type of thing that we hear about all the time. You're like, that person is a billionaire. But they do that, and you're like, yeah, well, you watch a video of them, and of course they're the most charming people in the world. And it's the way that, you know, you see the subtle changes. So, you know, we start off seeing Mukundan, and he's just kind of like in plain clothing, and he's, you know, he looks a little bit kind of schlubby, but by the end, he looks so well put together and so confident in everything that he does. And he just, he's not and this was my favorite thing about his performance. It's all understated with the exception of his narration. So his internal narration is where he really lets himself kind of go a little bit nuts. Like, there was a scene where he's talking with his wife about something, and he's like, I got to remember to tell her not to do that ever again, because that was crazy. Or, like, while he's getting married, like, I might go for that one a little bit later on. Like, he's constantly thinking about these other things, and it was just a joy and a delight and a total surprise, especially with the movies that I've seen where there was a very, very hard dramatic tinge, and this felt really consciously delivered to be like, yes, we're going to subvert your expectation of drama because we're going to give it to you, but we're also going to give it to you in a way that is fun and palatable. So that at the end of the day, you feel like you watched this really fun movie. Like I said, it kind of felt like a Farrelly Brothers movie. Not that extreme, but maybe more like Broken Lizard, right? Like, so, Super Troopers, something along those lines, where it made me smile from ear to ear. It made me legit look at my television and say, I love this movie multiple times. And I don't know if I can give it any higher compliments than that. Yeah. The beginning, like you had said, is a little bit slow, especially when we, go to talk with whoever at the place who you eventually find out owns the hospital, and he's trying to like get the stuff in on it. But even that pays off later. Yeah. You've got about 10 minutes after the initial kind of opening scene of just understanding who he is in his brain, where you're kind of like, all right, where are we going with this? What are we doing with this? But the moment his mom breaks her ankle and you see that cobra slide away, something's going to happen. And then we get a little bit of slow coming into the hospital. And the moment we get to that hospital, we're off to the races, baby.
Definitely, man.
Love
it. Yeah, no, it was really good. It's, he's such a slime ball. Like, at sometimes he gets to that point. I think like at the end, it's like something, I think he's married at one of the last things, he's talking to somebody and he says something like, to another woman that's speaking, and he says something like, I might be in love with her. Like, he's just
yes, that's what I'm talking. That was the scene I'm talking about. While his wife is pregnant in the room with him.
So he just has no moral conscience at all, basically at that point. Really interesting. Really, I think there's a lot to sort of like about this movie, and I'm glad you watched it, man. It's definitely one that was one of the. It's strange. This movie wasn't that big of a commercial hit, I think, for whatever reason. I think there was some reasons with distribution and maybe marketing a little bit, but it definitely got a bit of a It definitely got picked up more once it hit streaming.
It would be tough to market.
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing. It's probably not the kind of movie you probably take your family to watch. It wouldn't be marketed like that. It's probably not one that a whole family would enjoy. It's for
you don't want to take your whole family to watching how to like make it seem like a rickshaw fell off a bridge instead of police beating a guy to damn near death for absolutely no reason whatsoever. You don't want to take him to that movie. You take him to a cartoon dog movie.
Exactly right.
No, all of those wild, subtle twists. And like, also, the whole police angle is something we didn't even get into. We don't need to, but it all just serves that greater thing, which is like the machinations that we trust in our society may be faulty and crumbling, and somebody is probably benefiting from it.
Definitely.
And to watch, an exploded kind of caricature of how that goes through Mukundan's eyes, and to hear how his brain works, you like it again. I was charmed. I was into it. He is Jordan Belfort for doing this in hospitals, and it just was a real delight.
Yeah.
Is he a piece of garbage? Yeah. But did I love him? You bet.
Exactly right. I think we can probably come to the wrapping up now, man. I think we've great to get your thoughts, obviously, man. Again, special thank you to Ashok for requesting this. Anyone listening, if you have any requests that you want, if you want Sunny or Doug or anyone, not Sunny or Doug, to sort of respond to any sort of our movies or anything like that, because I'll probably be covering them anyway. But if you want to get the views on them, drop in the messages. We're more than happy to accommodate.
Yeah. Let me know anything you think I should watch. I will absolutely get to it, as soon as I can. I'm a little busy, but I love watching movies to relax, so it kind of works out perfect.
Exactly right. Before we finish, man, where does this finish on your disc? I'll have to ask you to complete the episode. Where does this fall?
Grandpa killing dynamite.
Dynamite. Yeah. Yep. Grandpa killing dynamite.
Yep. Grandpa killing dynamite.
Yep.
Easily.
Yeah. No. That's
it is a bus full of people swerving into another bus full of people. Dynamite.
Correct. No, same.
God, I suck.
It's that's funny. It's same rating that we gave. So dynamite across the board. It's great one. If you haven't seen it, check out this review. Check out the one Sunny United, and then check out the movie or all three together. Couldn't speak highly enough of this movie. But Doug, this was awesome. Thanks a lot for watching this, and thanks a lot
and thank you again, Ashok. I really appreciate it, man. This was
awesome.
great.
Catch you soon.
See ya.